Hello there. Good evening, everybody. It's a Wednesday, and you know what that means? We're going to be reading tonight. I'm excited. I know if you guys were here on Sunday, I talked about potentially backing up a little bit in A Warrior's Heart. We're starting over. I only needed to back up partway into chapter 7 due to the edits. So I'm actually pretty pleased with that. Probably. You're probably right. So I'm gonna get myself a drink of water. Push this over here. And we're gonna get going. I backed up about a little more than half of the way through chapter 7. Like I said, I have been working on a lot of edits to A Warrior's Heart and several of my earlier stories to just kind of give them a little bit more depth and some character development. So that extended some of the chapters. So they might be a little bit longer, which is okay. That's actually what I was aiming for, because I wanted to kind of expand character growth a bit and kind of add to the narrative. Felt that it was really important to kind of to do that, especially for Marin's story, because there's a lot that she's dealing with right now. So we're going to read part of chapters, like the last, I don't know, half to 2/3 of chapter 7. And then if we can get all the way to chapter 10, we will. I'm actually going to try to stay a little bit longer today because I don't have to work tomorrow. So I'm excited about that. And yes, I'm wearing my Yoda shirt. For those who can't tell. I know it. Sorry. I actually have tomorrow off, which is, I'm still getting used to the fact that I actually have paid holidays. We get, I think, 8 a year. I'd actually have to go look at the calendar. But we get others too, which I can't always keep track of. I have a calendar somewhere. And sometimes we just get random days off. I also took off the weekend, so I'm not stressing too much about streaming a little bit later. So alright. Yeah, so we are, say, a little over 1/3 of the way into chapter 7 where we're picking up. I had to actually skim to find out where we had left off, roughly. So there might be a little bit of a gap where we stopped with chapter 7 beforehand, and where we... and where we're picking up, because I kind of blended a couple of the chapters together. Just for length and continuity's sake, actually. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, or emotional outbursts before I start reading? Now's your chance. I stole that line from Stay Alive 7, actually. Hey. It's your chance to speak your mind before I get into the nitty-gritty. Oops, I'm dropping things. There we go. It's something she always says. Okay. Well, if nobody has any questions or comments or concerns, I can start reading. I'm cool with that. Dinner is good. Welcome, Ajao. Go have that dinner. It's important. Alright. Oh, did they reset? You have to you have to actually click on the front row and do it. I don't know, I might have to reset it. The biddies, unless you actually apply them to, yeah. I don't know why it's not working, I'll have to look at that. Because it should. I think it didn't even pop up in chat, are you sure? It should have said something. That's weird, because it didn't even, yeah, it didn't even pop up in chat. That's really strange. It's very weird. I may have to get with, Sniper or somebody after to get that sorted, because it should work. I don't know. Technical difficulties. Okay. Thought I had it set up correctly, but maybe I don't. Do I have to mod anything or anything like that? I don't know. Okay. Yeah, oh, there it goes. Okay. Ooh. Jeez, that's loud. That works. That was really loud. My eardrums. I don't know. Thanks to Sniper and Wraith, thank you for your attempts. It did record your biddies. It's actually showing at the top of chat. But it didn't apply them to front row for whatever reason. Yeah. Yeah, do that. Alright. Here we go. We're backing up into chapter 7. So hold on to your drinks. Stefan sat in the quiet of his study, a well-worn leather-bound journal open in his lap. The spine cracked softly as he turned each page with care, fingers brushing over diagrams, notations, the occasional ink smudge that had bled through with age. His father had gifted the journal to him before his first year at the academy, and though Stefan had long since forged his own path, he still returned to it. There were always insights tucked in the margins, small truths that hadn't struck him before, lessons layered between the lines. He smiled to himself as he thumbed to a favorite entry on lightsaber footwork and center of mass stability, lessons he'd passed to Marin, to Andrea, to so many others. So many trials, so many students. The knock on the edge of the open door was soft, almost hesitant. Stefan looked up. Marin stood just beyond the threshold, hands folded before her, tunic smooth but slightly wrinkled. Her braid was freshly tied, though a few strands had escaped around her temples. Dang it, my ears. I gotta turn that down. It's loud. It's fine. It's fine. It gets my attention. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. What volume thingy am I turning down? Okay, yeah, I'll figure it out, because that was... But we know it works now. Yeah, they really are. It's like twice now. Oh my goodness. At least I had finished my sentence. Oh, you guys. Ooh. Okay. The sniper, really? Oh my goodness, you didn't have to do that. Thank you. Let's see. Can I redeem things in my own chat? Yes, I can. It's okay, I have 2 biddies. And I don't think I can use them in my own chat anyway. Level 1 complete, thank you guys! Level 2? It's been quite some time since I've had a hype train, so thank you. I appreciate that. Alrighty. Now where was I? Yes. Fix that. There we go. I thought you'd be practicing at the Praxia, Stefan said, his voice light as he motioned her inside. I have been, Sensei, she said, stepping in and brushing her fingers against the tunic's hem again. And I spent some time with Jared. At that, Stefan raised an eyebrow, a knowing look in his eyes, but there was no disapproval in his tone. Only a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Well, he mused, turning a page and scanning it idly, that's not something I'd condemn. We can't bind ourselves to the same rigidity that the old order clung to. The galaxy has changed. Marin blushed a shade deeper and moved towards the chair opposite his. I felt like I needed to talk to him after the meeting. I thought I'd upset him. And I know people were concerned about how quickly I trusted Aren. She paused, fingers tightening on her skirt. I can't explain it. Stefan didn't interrupt. He let her sit with the silence. Things can move fast, he said, looking up from the journal, especially in times like this. And sometimes the Force guides our instincts before we understand them. That feeling of rightness you mentioned, it matters. You felt it before. She nodded firmly. I have. He marked a page with a thin ribbon, closed the journal gently and set it aside. Then his gaze fixed on her with quiet intent. What's really on your mind, Marin? She hesitated. Then she looked down, cheeks flushed again, and her voice dropped a fraction. I was wondering what's involved in the saber trials. Stefan leaned back, folding his arms loosely. His gaze didn't waver. It's the final trial in many ways, he said. A duel, usually against someone you've never sparred with, who is more skilled. It isn't about winning or losing. It's about control, precision, composure, how you wield the blade, and how you carry yourself in the moment. The High Council will observe, as will your master, Andrea. Marin nodded slowly. I remembered Jared's. I didn't see it, but I could feel it. She went quiet then, her thumb tracing over the edge of her father's tags where they hung from her neck. Her voice, when it returned, was barely audible. I keep wondering if I'm rushing this, if I'm pushing too hard. Stop it! What's your jump scares? Dang it! Oh my. I thought you said you were broke. You're just trying to distract me. I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing.
It is unavoidable.
My point exactly! My point precisely. The timing? Wow. The timing was pretty incredible, I'm not gonna lie. Oh. Anyway. Oh, we continue. Mm-hmm. There's usually anywhere between 5 to 30-second lag on stuff like that on stream. I've noticed it with Stay Alive's as well. I have to kind of account for that when I'm trying to redeem things. So, something to keep in mind. Now, if I can just do this without losing my voice, I'll be doing great. Oh, you guys! Level 2! Oh my goodness. Level 2... Level 2, 17%. Thank you, guys. You're awesome! You're awesome. Let's see. It's gonna be loud. Okay. Yes, indeed. Choo-choo. Thank you so much, guys. I was gonna redeem the Star Wars win, but it's like 30 seconds long and it's probably quite loud, so decided not to. I don't want my stream to get muted. I mean, I can if you really want me to. Oh my goodness! Thank you, Ajo! Alrighty. We do this. I can play it later if you want. It's just really loud and it would... I don't want my stream to get muted too much. Alright. Stefan chuckled and held up the journal from his desk. We all feel that way, he said. Even after the trials, you'll still be learning. I've been a knight for decades. A master. I've still come back to these pages even now. That drew a faint smile from Marin. When talking to Jared about Iran taught me something about how I listen, about what I expect. He gave her a look of approval. As I said, every day is new. A voice interrupted them from the hallway beyond. Anyone home? Stefan's head came up. He stood, already halfway to the door, and called out, Didn't we teach you to announce yourself properly? Marin had tensed at the unexpected voice, her hand inching towards one of her throwing knives before she caught herself. But she relaxed the moment Stefan's posture did. He knew whoever it was. A moment later, a young woman stepped into view, dropping her 2 regulation-issue bags to the polished wood floor. Well, she said, smiling as she brushed wind-blown hair from her face. I wanted it to be a surprise. Mom knew. Stefan let out a breath, visibly softening as he embraced her. You're always hiding things from me. Marin stood slowly as the realization struck her. The woman wore a sharp black Katani naval uniform, a white ring stitched around the hem of both sleeves. A small bar gleamed at her collar, and though she looked travel-worn, there was no mistaking the pride in her stance. I didn't know you had a student visiting, the young woman said apologetically. One of your sisters, actually, Stefan replied with a glint of humor. He turned to Marin. Marin Durza. This is my daughter, Catherine. Marin's eyes widened. She hadn't met this one. Andrea had spoken of her in passing, but somehow the pieces hadn't ever clicked. She stepped forward instinctively, her posture shifting. A pleasure, Miss Card, she said, formally, gripping Catherine's arm in the traditional warrior's clasp. The uniform stirred something in her, old memories, distant grief, and she blinked quickly to ground herself. Catherine returned to the grip easily enough, and then gave a lopsided smile. The uniform throw you off? Marin exhaled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. A bit. Memories of my father. He wore something similar before he retired. I've heard some of your story, Catherine said. Andrea likes to share them. This is the medical version of the Navy's standard uniform, she said, pointing to the white ring. It got me through my studies. She's been in training at the Academy on Catane, Stefan. And finished, Catherine interrupted, thumbing the rank insignia at her collar. Ensign Catherine Card reporting in. Marin's smile widened. I thought I'd recognize the colors. Congratulations. Then, more quietly, it's good to meet you. If I'm interrupting, I can come back later, Catherine offered, glancing towards the hallway. I could use a nap before Mom gets home anyway. That transport was full of cadets, and I didn't sleep one bit. We have an ad starting in just under 5 minutes. You're not interrupting, Stefan said, though his expression remained touched with surprise. But so fast? You raised a fast learner, Daddy, she teased. Got my fleet assignment and everything. Marin looked up sharply at that. She knew how long the academy track usually took. Where are you posted? Catherine grinned and turned to show the patch stitched to her shoulder. Deep navy with silver thread surrounding a familiar symbol. CSS Valkyrie, FCC 5078. Her smile widened slightly at Marin's reaction to the Valkyrie patch, her voice tinged with pride and a little bit of disbelief. They said my training evaluations caught someone's attention. I didn't expect to get asked for it, especially not by Admiral Payne himself. Stefan chuckled softly, half amused, half wary. Payne always did like to collect promising cadets early. You must have made quite the impression. Marin's gaze lingered on the shoulder patch for a moment longer. The emblem stirred something faint but familiar. Ghosts of missions past, of names whispered in briefing rooms and stories traded in mess halls. The Valkyrie, she murmured. Isn't that where the Nighthawks are billeted? Catherine nodded. For now, yes. I won't be with them directly, though. Medical support staff rotate through the wings, but I'll mostly be working under Commander Irulin in the Fleet Infirmary. She hesitated, then offered with quiet humility. I know I'm not Jedi material like the rest of the family, but I wanted to do something that still mattered. Stefan's expression softened, and he stepped over to place a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't have to be a Jedi to make a difference, Catherine. You never did. And don't think for a moment that I'm anything but proud. Catherine nodded, eyes glinting just a little too brightly, for someone who insisted she wasn't tired. Thanks, Dad. Marin had remained quiet through the exchange, her arms folded gently at the waist. At Catherine's last words, though, she stepped forward again. You don't need the Force to carry the weight of the wounded, she said, softly. Some of the strongest people I've known couldn't lift a stone with their minds, but they carried soldiers through fire anyway. Catherine blinked, a little startled, and then smiled, offering a small but grateful nod. I'll remember that. Thanks. There was a soft silence after that. Comfortable, if brief. Stefan cleared his throat and gave a gentle nudge toward the hallway. Go on, get some rest. Your mother will want your full attention when she gets home. Catherine gave a casual salute, her grin returning. Yes, Sensei, she teased, and then gave Marin a small wave before vanishing down the hall, boots light against the polished wood. Once she'd gone, Marin returned to her seat across from Stefan, this time folding her legs beneath her. Her eyes lingered on the doorway for a moment before she glanced back to her teacher. She reminds me of Andrea, she said softly. Not just the looks, something in the way she walks, like she's already carrying others with her. Stefan gave a quiet chuckle, settling back into his seat and thumbing the edge of the old journal again. Andrea always did set the pace, but Catherine's forged her own path. Jedi or not, she found her calling. He glanced sidelong at Marin. Like someone else I know. Marin ducked her head slightly, a faint flush returning to her cheeks, but there was no embarrassment this time. Just quiet acknowledgement. I'm still learning, she said simply. As you should be. The moment we stop, we start to forget what made us strong in the first place. He tapped the closed journal once more and pushed it across the table towards her. Here. It's not part of the archives, but you might find something useful in it. My father wrote it when I was just beginning my own training. Marin hesitated, and then accepted the worn volume with both hands, handling it with the same reverence she would give a sacred text. Thank you, Sensei. She held the journal for a moment longer and then smiled faintly, eyes drifting to the window where golden sunlight now poured across the mountain beyond. It's going to be a long day, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Stefan followed her gaze and then nodded once. Good. That means there's still time to get something done. I'm gonna stop right there because we're about to be in an ad in like 20 seconds. So, yeah, I don't want to do that. Mm. Are you guys done with the jump scares yet? It's all good. Alright, I was about to start, so I will be right back. See you in a minute and a half, guys. Alrighty. We're back from our ad. Thanks for chilling out, guys. I appreciate that. Now we're gonna continue reading. Alright. Just finding where I left off. The Praxium, late afternoon. Jared sat beside her on the weathered stone wall circling the outer gardens of the Praxium. The sky above the mountains had begun to glow with the last light of day, warm golds fading into lavender and indigo. Indigo. Can't words today. Wind stirred the pines on the slopes below, carrying the scent of sun-warmed stone and distant mist. He turned slightly towards her, watching her fidget with the seams of her trousers, the ones she rarely wore, chosen deliberately for tonight's trial. Nervous? He asked, his voice quiet, teasing, gentle in the way only he ever managed to be with her. She flushed, cheeks pink as she laced her fingers into his. Her presence in the force was steady beneath, but frayed at the edges, like wind dragging its claws across still water. Is it that obvious? She whispered, giving his hand a quick squeeze. She focused on the rhythm of their shared contact, the way it slowed her breathing. Were you this nervous? Jared chuckled, the sound low and warm. You fidget when you're nervous. A lot. He squeezed her hand back. Yeah, I was. I didn't know who I'd be up against or how badly I'd get tossed around. They're not gentle. Marin exhaled softly, her gaze dropping. I've been practicing non-stop for days. more than I did during my lessons, even more than at home, she didn't say. The quiet that followed made it clear. Her thoughts turned inward, to Jarius. She could almost see him at the edge of the field, arms crossed, nodding once as if to say, "You're ready." He wished he could see this. Jared opened his mouth, but a flicker of motion caught his eye. He turned. Bran was striding towards them through the archway, his tunic askew and a hand pressed to his upper arm. Bran. Jared stood as the other Jedi approached, concern tugging at his forehead. What happened? Caught a block a little wrong, Bran admitted with a crooked grin. I'm alright, just sore. I learned a lot. Meryn rose, brushing the dust from her tunic. Her gaze moved to Bran's injury, and instinctively she reached towards him. Her emotions were chaos, but the healer's touch came on reflex. Her fingers hovered just above the fabric of his sleeve, and her hand began to glow with a soft blue-white light. Hold still. The energy sank into the bruised muscle, soothing it. Bran exhaled, some of the tension in his shoulders easing. Thanks, he murmured. You're next. Keep your guard up. It's nothing like the training in the field. Meryn gave a small smile, but her eyes stayed on the tree line for a moment longer. She didn't speak. The nerves hadn't left, only tucked themselves deeper behind purpose. Then the voice came from the archway. Meryn? She turned. Dylan Card stood under the stone arch, framed by firelight from the Praxium's upper lanterns. His tone was calm and steady, impossible to read. Jared brushed her cheek. Luck, love, he murmured, and then watched her rise to her feet. She straightened her belt, gave Bran's arm a final squeeze, and nodded. I'm ready. Her saber hung in its usual spot, clipped at her back. For once, her belt held no knives, no hidden shuriken, no Mandalorian tricks. Only the weapon that mattered. Dylan guided her through the stone corridors, circling the edge of the main courtyard until they reached the dueling circle. There, the council waited. Stefan Card stood at the center. Masters stood or sat in quiet observation along its perimeter, their presence glowing in the force like constellations. She paused where Dylan gestured. Across the ring, a single figure knelt in meditation, robes still drawn close, hood obscuring their features. The fabric was dark, not Stefan's indigo, but something deeper. It didn't stretch outward towards him. Not yet. Meryn, Stefan called softly. She took a breath and bowed low. Sensei, she whispered. She knelt, settling into the stillness. The force wrapped around her like wind over grass. She felt Jared somewhere on the edge, Bran too, and others. Warmth, calm, curiosity. A presence brushed hers, familiar. The same that had echoed in her crystal chamber. She smiled faintly. You may center yourself. Stand when you are ready. 5 minutes passed in silence. Then slowly she rose. The figure across from her stood at the same moment. The hood fell back. Renius Card. Meryn's heart stilled and then began to beat faster. Hoarse. She gave him a subtle nod. He returned it with a faint smile that vanished as Stefan clapped his hands once. Renius moved instantly, green saber igniting with a hiss. Meryn's orange and black blade came to life in reply. He struck first, leaping forward with the precision she'd seen only once before. But Meryn wasn't there. She rolled aside, her blade humming past his ankle. She flipped to a low guard, backhanded, eyes locked to his. He came at her again. They exchanged a series of strikes, high, low, diagonal. Renius pressed harder. He seized her wrist mid-motion, twisted, and threw her with a shoulder toss. She hit the floor, tucked and rolled cleanly back to her feet, already grinning. So that's how it's going to be. He came in again. She matched his rhythm, using momentum and her Mandalorian training to keep him guessing. She swept, ducked, flipped, her saber flashing through the dusk. One sweep grazed his stomach. He returned the blow, slipping past her guard to tag her forearms with a sharp hiss of plasma, and then roundhouse kicked her hard enough to send her sliding. Pain bloomed across her ribs. Her sleeve smoked slightly, but Meryn rose. Always. She charged, elbow to his back, break contact, drop low, sweep again. He evaded with a flip, but she was already moving. Her saber spun from her fingers, a trick she'd learned from throwing blades. It caught him center mass and snapped back to her waiting hand. Then, stop! Stefan's voice rang out. The fight ended mid-movement. Marin stilled. Rheneas lowered his saber. Expect a rematch, she murmured in her thoughts. She didn't answer, only nodded as she knelt and caught her breath. Marin, Stefan said, firmly, addressing her with the tone of a teacher, and something fonder. We'll summon you once a decision is reached. For now, rest. She bowed her head, to him, to the council, to the circle itself, and then she turned and left. Jared was waiting where he'd always been. She didn't speak, just crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his neck, tucking her face into the curve between his shoulder and jaw. It was a challenge, she said softly, her voice half laugh, half sigh. He kissed her cheek. I felt that hit you took. His hands hovered over her forearms. How bad? Singed, she admitted. Not broken. They both turned as Rheneas approached. Jared blinked. You fought him? She smirked. Surprised? Rheneas just grinned. She got in more than one hit. Clearly slipping, Jared said dryly. You sure you're okay? I will be. Marin tilted her head. You still want that rematch, Rheneas? Oh, definitely. Then Andrea arrived, leaning casually against the stone wall. Once was enough. For now, she said, eyebrow raised at her brother. Teacher, Marin said, bowing again, her voice steadier now. Andrea smiled. You did well. Better than some expected, even. Rheneas was holding back, but not much. I know, Marin replied. I could feel it. They stood together as the light faded, the Praxium courtyard now lit by soft lanterns and starlight. Marin tucked her feet under her, finally still. Not waiting. Not worrying. Just breathing. The gardens had quieted. With Rheneas gone and the last traces of sunset fading, the shadows lengthened, soft and cool against the stone. Lanterns had been lit along the walkway, casting pools of gentle light in a golden ring around the inner courtyard. Marin remained seated on the stone wall, her arms resting lightly on her knees. Fingers still curled slightly as if her saber were still in hand. Jared hadn't moved far, just enough to keep a protective space around her. He watched her, but didn't speak at first. She was still riding the high of the duel, he could tell. Part pride, part disbelief, part restraint. You did well, he said softly. Marin tilted her head just enough to glance at him. I don't know if I did enough. He shook his head. You're not supposed to win. That wasn't the point. You adapted, pushed through, you kept your head when most would have lost it. I wasn't calm, though, she admitted, her voice low. Not at first. Even now, my hands won't stop shaking. He reached over and lightly took one of her hands in both of his, rubbing a thumb across her knuckles. You were never supposed to be perfect. Just present. And you were. He looked at her seriously. You always are. She looked down at her hands, quiet for a moment. It felt different. More real than any sparring match I've done before. You pushed hard, and I pushed back. Her voice faltered. And part of me liked that. Jared leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. That's not weakness. That's what makes you a warrior. You found the edge and didn't fall off of it. Yet, Marin said with a dry smile. A voice behind them interrupted gently, but not unkindly. If you had fallen, you wouldn't be sitting here with us. Andrea's tone was calm as she joined them, her dark blue robes making little sound as she stepped lightly across the path. She folded her arms and offered a knowing look. You didn't just pass the test of the saber, Marin. You passed a test of will. You didn't fight to win, fought to endure. Marin opened her mouth, but no words came at first. Then he held back. Yes, Andrea replied, but not as much as you think. You challenged him, and I think you surprised him more than once. She stepped closer and then sat on the edge of the wall opposite them, glancing between them. You're strong, but what stood out to me wasn't your strength. It was your discipline. You let the fight breathe. That's something a lot of knights never learn. Marin's brow furrowed. You think they'll approve me? I think they're talking about it, Andrea said. And if they don't, they'll be wrong. But I trust my father, and I trust the council. Jared glanced over at Marin and offered a lopsided smile. And you know they'll listen to Andrea. Andrea rolled her eyes, but didn't deny it. I only speak when it matters. Marin's hands tightened briefly in her lap, then released. Part of me thought I'd feel ready, that I'd be excited. She paused. But now I don't know what I feel. Andrea leaned forward, elbows resting on her knees. That's how I felt, too. Jared can probably tell you the same. She tilted her head. What do you feel right now, Marin? Marin stared out across the gardens for a long moment before answering. Like, something's about to change, but I'm still carrying everything I was before. All of it. Her voice dropped. I don't know what that makes me yet. Andrea studied her for a long time. It makes you honest. And that's more than I can say for half the knights I've met. That got a soft snort from Marin, and from Jared, who chuckled and leaned back on his hands. You already carry your blade like a knight, Andrea continued. Now the council needs to decide if they're ready to call you one. And that is the end of chapter 7. The anteroom beyond the main hall of the Praxium was dimly lit, designed more for quiet contemplation than confrontation. Pale afternoon light filtered through narrow windows high in the stone walls, casting long beams that shifted slowly as the sun lowered behind Mount Adon. The council sat in a loose circle, their chairs gathered around the old marble floor, which bore the marks of generations. No one raised their voices here. Stillness was the rule. Yet tension hummed beneath the surface. Must we truly consider this? Jilkun Tam asked, folding his arms as he leaned forward. The weight of age and experience lent authority to his tone. There was hesitation in his eyes. I understand your reasoning for the Praxium here, Stefan. You've made your case for a more grounded personal approach to Jedi instruction. However, I must ask. His gaze swept the circle. A Mandalorian? Stefan's guard said nothing at first. He merely closed the old journal in his lap with a soft thump and set it aside before looking up. I don't see the issue, Jilkun, he said evenly. We welcomed Zen Canadius into our ranks despite his non-traditional upbringing. I recall no protest when Callista Jassarin, who studied both our ways and theirs, stood among us, nor when Senator Asibyl requested that I train Corellian guards to protect their leaders. The same has been done with Terrans, with Alderanians, even Dathomiri, when asked. Christian Jin, seated beside him, placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. No one disputes your contributions, Stefan. Nor your students, but you must admit this case is different. How so? The voice came from Master Nallus, calm as still water, but firm. He sat across the circle, arms loosely folded in the sleeves of his cloak. His gaze was not critical, but deeply thoughtful. I agree that this is different, but not in the way that Jilkun means. Rillan leaned forward. Then how? She has walked both paths, Nallus said, since childhood. Not by rebellion or accident, but as inheritance. She was raised within both codes, not as one and then the other, but at the same time. The room stilled as he spoke, his voice quiet but resonant. That duality, when untempered, can destroy a soul, he continued. But in her case, it has not. Because she was not raised by warlords or extremists. She was raised by those who saw both truth and compassion. I have seen Andrea's hand in her, gentleness balanced by fire, and I see Stefan's hand as well. Marin Durza is no accident. She still carries grief, Jilkun said. As do we all, Nallus countered gently. But I reached out to her in meditation, knowing this conversation was coming, and I felt something I did not expect. What was that? Chris, turning slightly in his direction. Peace, Nallus answered. but not the kind that's found at the end of a war. The kind that's fought for, day by day, hour by hour. The peace of someone who has lived with darkness and chosen to fight anyway. Stefan nodded. Her trial tonight proved her skill, Chris added. Bernius pressed her, even held back, but she adapted with each strike. Not by instinct alone, but by discipline and trust. A chuckle came from one of the others, Master Welland, who'd fought beside Stefan in the old campaigns. I saw Rhaenyra's on Mist. That boy's a windstorm. He pressed her, even slightly, and she didn't lose her head? That speaks volume. Several of them nodded. The debate was shifting. Stefan looked to Jill Kunn. His voice was softer now. She carries burdens, but she's never allowed them to define her. Not the loss of her father, not the attack on Galan, not the betrayal on Coruscant. She returned to the path each time. That's not something I taught. That's who she is. Jill Kunn exhaled through his nose and rubbed a hand along the edge of his jaw. You're certain she's ready then? I am, Stefan said, and if she fails a future test, it will not be because she lacked strength or guidance. It will be because none of us does this perfectly. Not even us. There was a beat of silence. Then Jill Kunn nodded slowly. Very well. I defer to Nallis's insight. And yours. Master Nallis closed his eyes for a moment, a faint smile on his lips as he reached quietly through the force. Andrea, bring Merrin with you. We are ready. Andrea fell quiet mid-sentence. She'd been speaking lightly with Jared and Merrin, something half teasing about Rhaenys' overconfidence during duels. But in the next moment her posture shifted, her eyes drifted shut, and her breath stilled. Merrin recognized the posture, even before the ripple passed through the force. When Andrea opened her eyes again, the playfulness was gone. What remained was focus, calm, and something else. Gravity. Father would like you to return to the courtyard, Merrin, she said softly. Jared, you're welcome as well. Merrin's breath caught. It wasn't the words. It was the way that Andrea spoke them. With the same solemn cadence Merrin had once heard at her first rite of passage with her clan, and again on the steps of the Praxium when she'd been accepted for formal training. She hiccuped softly, half surprise, half nerves, and rose swiftly to her feet. Her fingers smoothed the fabric of her tunic with automatic precision, even as her heart thudded wildly beneath it. Jared said nothing. He simply rose beside her and fell into step on her right, quiet presence grounding her. Andrea walked at her left, calm and composed. The courtyard was quiet when they stepped through the archway, the last light of sun gilding the mountaintops in molten gold. Council had reformed the circle, masters in ceremonial robes, some standing, some seated, all watching. Stefan was there, waiting in the center as Jared approached. He raised a hand slightly, his signal gentle but firm. Outside the circle, Jared. Jared dipped his head in acknowledgement, stepping aside without protest. Andrea gave Merrin's shoulder a final squeeze as they stepped toward the center together. Then she stopped and remained behind, allowing Merrin to walk alone the final steps. The hush was total. Not tense, but reverent. Merrin could hear everything now, the chirr of insects in the trees beyond the walls, the wind through the pines, the low hum of energy in her blood. Her boots made no sound on the stone as she crossed the circle's heart and knelt without instruction. It felt right, grounding. Her eyes lowered, her hands settled on her thighs. She breathed in slowly, then out. Stillness. When Stefan's voice came, it broke the quiet not with force, but with solemnity. Merrin Durza. She lifted her head. You came to this place not seeking to become what the galaxy expected of you. You came unsure, uncertain of your path, but not of your will. You carried fire in your hands, but gentleness in your heart. I saw it the first time you held a training saber, just as I saw it when you turned it to your friend in the aftermath of battle. You wanted to learn our ways, but not at the cost of the ones who raised you. He paused, letting the words settle. You showed me from the beginning that you could hold both the lightsaber and the best god, and wield them in service of something greater than yourself. I told you I would never demand oaths you were not ready to take. That remains true. Her throat tightened. She met his gaze, feeling the power in his presence, not overwhelming, but an anchoring like stone beneath the roots. He turned slightly, including the other masters with a glance, and then looked back to her. You have faced trials in this place, as all do, but life has handed you others, far beyond what we would ask of any student. You endured. You returned. You carried what you had to, and you laid down what you could. You listened. You grew. There was another pause. The council has reviewed your trial. We have reached our decision. Your formal training is complete. The breath she drew was slow and careful, measured against the storm inside. But then Stefan continued. There remains one matter. Before we confer final recognition, it is customary for the council to hear from the initiate. Understand not just their readiness, but their intent. The question is simple, Baron Durza. What do you seek to do with what you've become? There was silence. The kind that held not judgment, but deep curiosity. She lowered her gaze for a moment, centering herself. Then she rose smoothly to her feet. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but steady. To be honest, I don't know the full answer yet. That admission hung in the air, raw and honest. But I know this much. Her hands were folded in front of her. My strength lies in observation, in listening, in uncovering what's hidden. Intelligence work has become not just useful to me, but a part of who I am. I want to continue that service in whatever form the council sees fit. She paused. She took a breath. But more than that, I want to serve as watchman of the Tanaka system, or wherever else I'm needed. I don't want to just uncover truths anymore. I want to protect those who have no voice. Her voice faltered slightly at the end, but she steadied it with a breath. That's the path I see. For now. Stefan studied her with an unreadable expression, and then he nodded. We'll consider your request, he said, his voice quiet once more, but answered honestly, that's what we needed. She bowed deeply and knelt once more, and though the moment had passed, the weight of it lingered. The council sat silent, not with doubt, but with consideration. The choice was close, and whatever came, she would meet it not as a student, but as herself. We have an ad starting in 2 minutes and 45 seconds. See how far I can get. When Marin had stepped back from the center of the circle and taken her place just outside the ring of stone, Stefan waited until her breathing slowed, until the tremble in her hands was no longer visible. Then, silently, he raised a hand toward the council. One by one, the master stood, turned, and followed him into the antechamber that branched off from the courtyard. It was an old meditation space that now served, in moments like this, as a sanctum of decision. The door swung shut behind them with a quiet click. Silence settled. Then Nallis folded his hands atop his lap and spoke first. She's ready. The declaration cut through the air like a bell, not in tone, but in clarity. It was not a question. It was not a suggestion. It was truth. Stefan's shoulders lowered, just slightly. He met Nallis' gaze. What did you sense during the trial? Focus, Nallis said simply. Not just in technique, though that was excellent, but in restraint. She fought with control, precision, not for pride, not to dominate, but to measure, to learn, to protect herself without doing more harm than needed. And afterward, she didn't boast. She didn't look for praise. She listened. Even now, she accepts uncertainty without fear. Christian Jane nodded beside him. She carries grief, but it doesn't define her. She listens when she doesn't have to. Even when challenged, even when cornered, she centers herself on something more than anger or pride. I saw it in her mind just briefly. She remembers why she fights. Thank you for the lurk, Sea-Doodle. Welcome in. Could I please get a shout out for Sea-Doodle when somebody has a moment? Thank you. Relin, ever the quiet observer, glanced toward the corner of the chamber where a small lantern flickered low. She's not like many who stand before us. I don't mean that unkindly. She has strength, but not just in the blade. I saw her hesitation before the throw. I saw the moment she weighed the risk. And still, she trusted her instincts. She chose courage with consequence. Jilka and Tam, who had been so skeptical earlier, finally spoke. I confess, I was looking for evidence of recklessness, some echo of the anger I've seen in other half-trained Force sensitives. But she didn't lose herself. She knew Rinius was holding back, and she could have overreached. Instead, she matched his rhythm. She learned in the moment. And I'm gonna stop there, because we're about to be in an ad, so I will be right back. Go get a drink. Have a stretch. Alright, we are back. I'm so glad that I have a stream deck now. Like, let me tell you, it just makes my life so much easier when streaming. Hope everybody had a chance to get a snack or grab a drink. I did. And also, stretches are good too. I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time sitting while I'm playing games or while I'm at work. And I tend to slouch, so I always try to take time to stretch or get up and walk around if I have enough time to do that. Try to do that like every couple hours at work. Otherwise, I'm sitting in front of a screen all day. And then I come home and do it for like another 5 hours. So. Alright. No. Here for what now? What? Please elaborate.
You're a feisty
Whoa!
little one. Fit him with a restraining bolt.
Oh. Thank you so much for the resub! Thank you! You should get a... You might get a 1-year badge, maybe. Well, once you hit your 12 months. Thank you, sir! Oh my gosh! Ogle! Welcome in! You snuck in while we were getting a resub. Thank you. We were just taking a short break because there was an ad, so, yeah. I was about to get back to reading. It's getting intense! You have great timing. It's fine. It was actually appropriate, thank you. It's totally fine. Alrighty. Oh goodness. I think that water had bones in it.
You're a feisty little one.
Oh my god!
Hit him with a restraining bolt.
Thank you for the gift sub!
Gifted a tier 1 sub to Ogle32. They have given 31 gift subs in the channel.
Oh my goodness! Thank you, Ajo. I appreciate you. And Ogle, welcome to the archives officially with that gift sub. Look at that fancy badge you have now. That cup will fill up over time as your sub extends if you decide to do so. You also have caps lock on, it looks like. If you'd like to see how the subscriber badge looks a little bit farther along, you can take a look at mine by clicking on it. No, it's totally fine. But welcome to the archive patrons officially. Thank you, Ajo. I appreciate you. Alright. Okay. Where was I? Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Have a listen. Wow, okay, I need water again before I start. Good grief. Apparently there was bones in that water. I don't know. It just feels that way. And apparently I have smudges all over my glasses, so we're gonna fix that so I can actually see what the heck I'm reading. Because apparently I touched my lenses. I don't know how that works. Go figure. He exhaled. I still have concerns, but not about her training, and not about her character. She was always going to walk a different path, Stefan said quietly. We knew it from the start. But she walks it with grace now, Nellis added, not defiance. Here we go. Trying to keep the music so that it doesn't drown out my voice, so do let me know if that's the case. Okay. They sat with the words for a while. No debate, no further argument. And then Chris looked at Stefan. Would you speak for her now? He inclined his head. When Marin came to me, she was already strong, already skilled. She'd learned to track before she could read a star chart, could shoot straighter than some fully trained Katani Marines. She carried her father's armor in her heart. And her grief. There was a pause. Just a breath. But what she learned here was not to lay those things down. She learned how to carry them, how to shape them into something more than survival. I didn't teach her to become a Jedi in spite of her. I taught her how to become one through it. She chose her own name, he added quietly, and she has made that mean something. When he looked around the room this time, no one disagreed. Chris stood. Shall we call her back? No, Stefan said, rising fully. His voice was clear and quiet. We will go to her. A murmur of assent followed him as he turned back towards the courtyard. For once, they would not summon the apprentice to stand beneath judgment. She had already stood there and proven herself. Now it was the council's turn to rise and meet her as one of their own. Sorry, I'm getting a little choked up here because it's like a really powerful scene. So, please excuse my emotional outburst. Anyway. The courtyard was still when the council returned. The last red gleam of sunlight was bleeding out beyond the mountains, and the first pale traces of night glistened against the high stone walls. A breeze stirred faintly through the open-air ring, whispering through the pines beyond. Marin stood just outside the circle, her eyes lifting as she felt them approach, not just with her senses, but with something deeper. Her pulse slowed, then steadied. Jared straightened from where he'd been leaning against the stone wall, his expression unreadable, but proud. Stefan stepped forward into the circle, flanked by Andrea and Christiane. The others fanned out into a crescent behind them, silent witnesses beneath the darkening sky. This is not going to be exactly what you'd expect, so pay attention. Marin Durza, Stefan said, his voice calm across the stillness. Kneel. She obeyed at once, stepping forward and lowering herself to her knees in the very center of the circle. The Katani flagstones were cool beneath her palms, her breath visible now in the mountain air. Her head bowed low. She could feel the braid against her shoulder, the last mark of a learner. Andrea moved to stand just behind her, her presence quiet and composed, a woman of both tenderness and fire. And then Stefan drew the blade. It was not a lightsaber, not this time. The blade he carried was a ceremonial honor sword, forged generations ago in the mountain forges of Adon and kept for moments such as this. It had no name. Its scabbard was wrapped in indigo and silver cord, its edge curved in the Katani fashion. A Jedi lightsaber hilt rested at his waist, but it was not the sword that he held now, tradition demanded. He raised it to the sky and then lowered it slowly, the blade glinting in the last edge of the light. From the mountain, he said solemnly, we draw steel. He held the blade horizontally, arms outstretched. Through fire, we are shaped. Through storm, we are tempered. He turned and offered the blade in both hands to Andrea. She bowed, slow and reverent, and accepted the blade as he stepped aside. Andrea now stood directly behind Marin. She was quiet for a long moment. You have walked in shadow, Marin. You have risen again in light. Her voice was soft, but each syllable rang clear. You have stood your ground on foreign soil. You have bled not for power, but for those who could not fight. You have learned not only to wield the blade, but when to set it down. And in doing so you have become more than a warrior. Andrea reached down, her fingers brushing Marin's shoulder. Gently she found the braid, woven not just with hair, but with threads of her childhood, of the girl who had once stood small and unyielding beneath Katan's trees. She drew the blade up, flat edge gleaming. Marin closed her eyes. Cut was swift and precise. The braid dropped gently into Andrea's waiting palm. A hush fell. Then Stefan returned to stand before her, lightsaber now in hand. He ignited it, but only for a moment. The pale blue and silver blade casting a quiet light over them both. Rise, Baron Durza, he said, deactivating it and replacing it on his belt. You are no longer a student of the blade. She looked up at him, startled slightly. Her breath caught, but she rose, steady. You are no longer just my pupil. Sorry. You are no longer a child of morning. Stefan stepped forward and took her hands gently in his. Oh, my goodness. Sorry. You are Jedi. And Katani. Then, lowering his voice so only she could hear. And your father would be proud. Oh, sorry. Wow. Okay. Her lips trembled, her vision blurred. She had not cried during the trial, not through the pain, not even when Renius had thrown her to the ground. But now, she blinked, and the first tear slipped down her cheek. Andrea reached out and gripped her shoulder, grounding her, and then there was a flicker in the force. Not loud, not even dramatic, simply present, like the warmth of a campfire left behind, like the scent of metal and rain. Stefan turned sharply, sensing it too, and there, for the briefest instant just beyond the ring of council members, standing among the trees in the shadows, he saw the figure of a man, blue and gray armor worn with time, a hand resting at his belt. He was watching, not intruding, not shaping, just there. Stefan's breath caught in his throat. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But in that still moment he knew Jarius Durza had come. Not to question, not to claim, only to see. Then the presence faded like smoke on the wind. Stefan exhaled quietly, and Marin, though she didn't say it, turned her head ever so slightly towards the trees, as if she had seen it too. Jared stepped towards her at last, breaking the hush with a half-smile that trembled at the edges. Marin moved to meet him, and he took her in his arms, holding her tight as the others watched in silence. For tonight, no words were needed. She was whole. She was Jedi. She was home. Sorry. The courtyard slowly emptied. One by one, the masters offered quiet bows and words of approval before departing through the colonnades that lined the Praxium's heart. Andrea stayed close to Marin, leading her toward the reflecting pools at the far end of the garden. No words were needed, for now. They walked together in silence, just far enough for Marin to breathe. Jared lingered where he was, still seated on the low stone wall bordering the garden path. His hands were resting loosely on his knees, his posture relaxed, but his gaze had never left Marin. Not even once. You're going to wear a hole in the stones if you keep sitting there like that. Jared glanced sideways as Stefan's voice reached him. The older Jedi stepped up beside him, arms crossed lightly. His gaze following the same path Jared's had taken. She's earned this, Jared said softly. Every scar, every silence, every breath she thought she'd never take again. Stefan made a quiet sound in his throat. Agreement, pride, and perhaps something heavier. He sat down beside Jared, settling slowly like the weight of the night had finally reached his bones. His saber rested across his lap, no dormant, but its presence was still keenly felt. I've watched many students rise, she said after a moment. Some burned bright and flared out, some took decades to understand who they were, and some didn't make it that far at all. Jared didn't speak. You didn't have to. I trained her the best I know how, Stefan continued, but she made herself. There was a long pause, and then Jared murmured. She always did. For a while, they both just watched her. Marin had knelt again at the pool's edge, Andrea standing behind her. She was unbraiding what was left of her hair with slow fingers, washing the ceremonial braid before laying it gently into the small wooden box Andrea had brought for her. She's stronger than any of us were at her age, Stefan said at last. Jared exhaled slowly. She had to be. There was another quiet moment that passed between them. And then Stefan's voice softened. She chose you. Jared blinked and turned slightly towards him. What? She chose you, Stefan said again, eyes still fixed on Marin. Not just as a partner, as one of the few she trusts with every part of herself. You've seen her at her worst. You've still stayed. Jared looked down at his hands. I didn't always stay, he admitted. Not the way I should have. I failed her, more than once. Stefan gave a low hum of acknowledgement. We all do. That's part of being human. Part of loving someone. Jared's gaze lifted and met his. Do you approve? A small, quiet smile tugged at the corner of Stefan's mouth. I trusted you with my daughter in all but name long before I had to answer that question. That silenced Jared for a long moment. Then finally, thank you, Sensei. Stefan shook his head. No, just keep standing at her side. I will. They sat together for another quiet minute. The moon climbed higher. The wind returned, cool and gentle, stirring the leaves across the stones. Did you see him? Jared asked, voice barely above breath. Stefan looked over sharply, and then slowly nodded. He was proud, he said. Jared's chest ached. He needed that. Even if she never says it. Sorry. Stefan's reply was quiet. She knows. A figure approached then, bare footsteps soft across the courtyard stones. Marin. Her hair was loose now, falling just past her shoulders, and her eyes held a quiet brightness. She didn't speak, only reached down and offered both of them a hand. Jared took it first, then Stefan, rising with the same deliberate grace he always moved with. Sorry. They walked together, no longer master and student, just family. And for the first time in what felt like years, the night felt peaceful. We're not quite done yet with this chapter. There's a little bit more. I need water. I'm losing my voice. The mountain breeze was sharp but clean, drifting slowly across the high balcony above the Praxim's east wing. From here, the view stretched for kilometers across forests, ridgelines, and the cloud-wrapped peaks beyond. The stars had faded into the indigo blue of early morning, and the first light of dawn was beginning to spill over the horizon. Marin stood alone at the railing, cloak drawn close about her shoulders. Her hands were steady now. The braid lay nestled in the carved wooden box beside her. Andrea had offered to keep it, to preserve the memory for the archives, but Marin had refused gently. This one was hers to carry, a chapter closed, but never forgotten. She exhaled slowly and looked down at her hands. They bore the faintest red marks still, from Renese's blade, from the strain of the fight, from everything that had come before. But there was no tremor in them now, no fear, no uncertainty. Only choice, only breath. Behind her, the door opened. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. I wondered if I'd find you here, Jared said, voice warm from sleep but quiet. You haven't slept. I will, she replied softly. She paused, and then she added, I just wanted to watch it rise. He came to stand beside her, one arm slipping gently around her waist. She leaned into him without hesitation, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. It feels different, she said. Like something's shifted, not just here. She tapped her chest lightly. But in the force, in how I move through it, in what it asks of me. Jared was silent for a moment, and then, you've stopped running. Marin turned towards him slightly, eyes glinting in the golden edge of dawn. Maybe I have. He didn't press her. He only stood with her in the growing light, watching the sky change. The sun rose slowly, painting the ridges and snow-dusted peaks in rose and gold. The wind whispered through the pines far below, and somewhere a mourning dove called out, a soft, distant song of the new day. That's the end of chapter 8, you guys. How are we doing for time? 8:30? Yeah. I think we can do this. We might go a little bit past 10. We'll see how it goes. Ooh, okay. How we doing? Everybody doing okay? You doing good? I don't know about you guys, but yeah, that knighting ceremony, I don't know why, it was like really emotional for me, so. Okay. Okay. Chapter 9. The Murder loomed ahead, quiet and patient beneath the pale gold of morning light. A faint mist still clung to the trees along the ridge path as Marin stepped off the path, her Praxium tunic still wrinkled from the night's vigil. Oops, sorry. She hadn't slept, only sat beneath the stars until the first light touched the peaks. Her hand grazed the edge of the warder's boarding ramp. As she passed it, fingers trailing along familiar durasteel. The sound of the hatch hissing open grounded her more than the mountains or the morning chill ever could. This ship, this home, had carried her through storms worse than this. And now, for the first time, she walked its corridor not as a Padawan, but something more. The lightsaber rested against her hip, not the orange-black... Whoops, sorry. Her lightsaber rested against her hip, the orange-black one. Oops, sorry. She made her way down the corridor and laid it gently on the desk. Oops, sorry. Before she could even catch her breath, the comlink buzzed. Erin sighed softly and ran a hand through her wind-tangled braid, what was left of it. The loose strands by her ear caught in the morning light. The com's ID flickered. Colony admin. Erin. She tapped the device and activated the holocom. A blue projection of Erin materialized above her desk, seated as ever behind his old wooden desk. Greetings and salutations, Lady Durza. I apologize if this is a bad time. She blinked, caught off guard by the formality. Not bad, per se, she said softly, dropping into her chair. What can I do for you, Erin? I have an ad starting in about 3.5 minutes. His gaze lingered briefly on her, on the robes, the fatigue in her eyes, the loosened hair. He didn't comment, only folded his hands. About a week ago, I was informed of an incident involving yourself and one of my fellow colonists. I chose not to share the matter more broadly to prevent panic, but I'd like to ask. You're safe, yes? Her breath left her in a quiet exhale. Well enough, she said, looking at him evenly. I was able to talk to him. We have reached an understanding. I see. Erin nodded, though the lines around his eyes deepened slightly. You are certain he will pose no further threat? She hesitated. The colony? No, he wasn't aware of what had been done or what it cost. When he learned the truth, he was shaken. I don't think he wants to be part of that anymore. I will defer to your judgment, Erin said, his voice quieter now. If you trust him, that's enough. For now. Marin inclined her head slightly. And the colony? All is well? He smiled gently. Progressing nicely, Lady Durza. As well as one could ask. Her smile faltered at the title. You don't have to call me that, you know. I know, he replied with quiet amusement. But I also know what you've done for this world. You've earned it. She flushed and reached up instinctively, only to find no braid. Her fingers hovered for a moment, brushing the side of her neck instead. Erin noticed. He tilted his head curiously. You don't mean to say... Aye. Her voice was small. I passed. The council hasn't formally announced it yet, but it's done. Hopefully they did. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Erin's head bowed in quiet acknowledgement. Congratulations, Lady Durza. I'm honored that the gift we gave aided you in that task. She looked down, her hands flexing slowly. It did. Thank you. I wish he could have seen it. The words escaped her before she could catch them, her voice tight. Erin didn't ask who she meant. I'm waiting to receive my assignment, she said, after a moment. So until then, I'm just practicing, thinking, catching my breath. His brow lifted. In that case, might I ask something of you? She looked back up. You said once you'd be willing to help with the self-defense of the colony. That offer still stands? She smiled faintly. It does. I haven't asked Aran yet, but I will. I think it would be good for him, too. Take your time, he said. We're not in immediate danger, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't prepare. Exactly, she murmured. Kirt Sod may be routed, but they're not finished, and there are others out there. Her gaze drifted to the viewport beside her desk, where the morning light was breaking through the canopy. He inclined his head. Let us know what you need. I will. She hesitated. Thank you, Aaron, for the call, for the crystal, for believing me when you had no reason to. I'm gonna stop right there because we're about to be in an ad. So I will be back in a minute and a half. Go get yourself a drink or have a stretch. I'll return. Alright. Yeah. Just figuring out where I left off. Aran smiled, eyes gentle. We've all seen what happens when people ignore the quiet warnings. I've no intention of repeating those mistakes. She ended the call in silence, the holocom dimming. Her fingers remained still on the desk for a long moment before she stood. Her saber hung heavy on her hip again, not from weight, but from meaning. Her braid was gone. Her path had changed. She wandered the forests around the Cart estate. The familiar scent of pine and smoke wafted in from the ridge above them. Marin moved slowly, her boots meeting the ground with practiced grace, but her steps lacked their usual certainty. Not hesitation, just wait. The Werda sat nestled beneath the tree canopy like some silent sentinel. The trees around it were dripping with morning dew, sunlight slanting through in golden spears. It was beautiful, quiet. It was home. Sort of. Marin paused at the base of the ramp and let the stillness wrap around her. Her saber was clipped at the back of her belt, silver hilt catching the faintest glint of morning light. She had passed the trials, but she still hadn't slept. Not really. Her braid was gone. Andrea had severed it cleanly with the short, curved katana blade Stefan had passed down for the occasion. Ancient steel, not plasma, no fanfare. Just the whisper of tradition in her father's presence felt like breath just beyond reach. A flicker in the force, a familiar warmth. And in the moment just after, when she knelt in the circle once more and bowed her head, she saw him. Jarius. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, just standing, watching her at the far edge of the stones. Blue-gray armor dull with age. One hand resting lightly on his belt, the other hanging at his side. He didn't speak. She'd felt it. The pride, the weight, the love. And then he was gone. The ramp shifted slightly as the hatch opened, and she blinked hard once. She didn't want to cry. About time, came a voice from within, rough as ever, dry as the mountains in high summer. Ethan Bevan leaned against the inner bulkhead of the Werda, arms crossed over his chest, looking like he hadn't moved in hours. His stance betrayed the stiffness that never truly left him anymore. You're late, Jessica. Marin exhaled, her lips twitching toward a smile despite herself. I had a thing, she murmured, stepping up the ramp and into the hold. You know, ceremony, lightsabers, all very dramatic. Ethan grunted. Right. I forgot. Something about becoming a Jedi Knight. She shrugged as if it meant nothing, but he saw the way her fingers twitched toward the empty place where her braid used to fall. The way she walked a little too carefully, like she hadn't fully come back down yet. He didn't say anything at first, just tilted his head and looked at her. Really looked. You didn't sleep, he said, stepping aside as she moved further in. Sit. I'm fine. Sit, Lady Durza. She blinked. He rarely used that title. When he did, it meant he saw something in her she hadn't yet dared to claim. She sat. The bench along the common area bulkhead was cool under her hands. Her saber shifted against her spine as she leaned forward slightly, elbows on her knees. He waited a few moments more and then moved across the galley and grabbed the small kettle from the rack above the stove. He filled it without ceremony, lit the burner, and stood in silence as the water came to a boil. I built it at home, she said suddenly, her voice soft. The saber, before we came to Catan. I know. I used the orange, black, and silver crystals. The ones Aaron gave me. You were watching from the corner the whole time. He made a small sound in his throat. You were muttering to yourself. She gave him a look. I was focusing. You talk to yourself when you're focused. I do not. He raised a brow. You do. And you get this look, like Jerry's used to, like you're building more than just a weapon. Her throat tightened at the mention of her father. She nodded once, fingers tightening on her knees. I saw him last night, she said, not bothering to explain. Just for a moment. Ethan nodded, and said, though he didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, was he proud? Yes. Good. The kettle whistled. He poured water into 2 mugs and passed one to her. No sweetener, no ceremony, just be hot. Strong and slightly bitter. Her hands wrapped around it gratefully. They sat there, the quiet settling between them. Finally, he said, I've trained you since I met you. You were 6. Marin. Blades, firearms, how to survive in the wild. I don't know much about lightsabers, but I know how to fight. And I know what it looks like when someone stops running and starts standing their ground. He turned towards her slightly, his voice rough. You're standing now. She looked up at him, her blue eyes tired but steady. I still don't know where I'm going. You don't have to, he said. Not today. He nudged her mug. Drink. Rest. Then we talk. She let herself smile. Just a little. Just enough. Yes, Uer, she said softly. The sun broke through the canopy just then, dappling the deck with pale gold. Saber at her back caught the light. Black, orange, and silver forged a fire in memory. For now, it was enough. Ooh. The Werda. Later that morning, the quiet hum of the Werda's environmental systems filled the air as Marin sat half-curled on the bench in the common area, her tea long since cold in her hands. Ethan had stepped away after she finally convinced him she'd be fine. He hadn't said it, but she could see it in his eyes. He needed space, too. She rested her forehead against the rim of the mug and exhaled, eyes half closed. Her breath stirred the faint scent of pine oil and metal, the familiar scent of home. There were footsteps on the ramp, not Ethan. Later, purposeful. Oops. Marin lifted her head just enough to see Jared step inside, blonde hair mussed as if he hadn't slept either. He paused in the entry, gaze softening as it landed on her. "Did you walk the whole ridge?" she asked hoarsely, though there was a teasing note beneath the rasp in her voice. He shook his head, letting the hatch seal behind him. "No. I stayed near the trail. Andrea said you'd be back this morning. I wanted to wait." Marin smiled faintly. "Didn't mean to keep you." "Don't mind," he said as he crossed the hold towards her. "I wanted to see you." She tilted her head, eyes searching his. "Did you?" He nodded before she could finish. "I was there, Marin, when they called you back in." She blinked slowly, and he reached out, brushing a few strands of dark hair back from her face. "You didn't hear what they said after you left. Nellis spoke highly of you. Even Joel Kunn didn't argue. Not in the end." "And Stefan? He was the one who called you his student, not just in skill, but in spirit." She swallowed hard, gaze dropping to her hands. Jared crouched in front of her, his eyes level. "You've earned this, Marin." "I don't feel like I have," she whispered. "Not yet." "You don't have to feel it," he said, brushing his fingers over her wrist gently. "You are it. I watched you fight Rinius like you've been doing this your whole life. I saw how you stood, how you answered the council." She shook her head slowly, her eyes clouded. "I didn't sleep. I haven't stopped feeling like I'm running since the day I built the saber." He looked at her for a moment and then leaned forward and kissed her forehead, just between her brows. His voice was low and warm. "Then stop running now." Her breath hitched. "You're safe," he said. "You're home." He gently took the mug from her fingers, set it aside, and then gathered her into his arms without ceremony. Her slight frame fit easily against his, her deep blue tunic and black pants soft against the weight of his robes. She didn't resist, just let her head fall against his shoulder, her hand curling lightly into his tunic. As he stood and carried her towards her cabin, he passed Ethan in the corridor, just at the junction. The older man had clearly doubled back, perhaps to check on her again. Jared met his gaze. Ethan's eyes narrowed at first, reflex, instinct, habit, but he said nothing. After a beat, he gave a short nod. Just once. Jared returned it silently. That was enough. He carried Marin into the small cabin and nudged the hatch closed with his elbow. Inside, the room was still as she'd left it, simple, austere, familiar. He set her down gently on the bunk and knelt to pull off her boots. She didn't stir. By the time he sat beside her again, she'd curled onto her side, her hand still loosely holding the hem of her tunic. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. Jared smoothed a hand down her back once, slow and careful, and then settled beside her, one leg curled beneath him, the other stretched out. He wouldn't leave her tonight, not after everything. His saber hung at his side. Hers sat on the wall mount near the door. 2 blades, 1 path. Jared let his eyes close. Outside, the forest exhaled, and the Werda stood quiet in the rising sun. Mimi, hello! Welcome back to stream. Good to see you. Pardon me while I'm over here losing my voice. That's backwards. Whoops, that's also sideways. There we go. Thank you for the shout out. Okay. The Card Estate, Lakeside, early morning after Marin's trials. The mist had only just begun to lift from the lake, veils of it drifting like breath across the water's surface. The Warder sat parked just beyond the tree line, her dark silhouette quiet beneath the trees, framed by the distant mountains. A stillness hung in the air, soft and cool, heavy with dew and reflection. Marin walked the narrow trail slowly, arms folded in front of her, her pace deliberate. The deep blue tunic of the Praxium still hung off her shoulders, the fabric marked by faint scuffs and welts. Her black pants were tucked into boots muddied from the night before. She still hadn't changed. Ren was already there, seated at the edge of the lake where the grass met the stone, his knees up and arms resting loosely over them. He didn't turn as she approached. Didn't need to. "The koi, Marin," he said casually, his gaze not leaving the water. "How was your day?" She gave a pained groan, the kind that had been building since she left the courtyard the night before. "I feel somewhat like I got run over by a hover truck," she muttered, easing herself down onto the stone beside him. She leaned back on her palms and winced. He chuckled under his breath and finally looked over, one brow arching. "Practicing training again?" "Naish," she murmured, smoothing her sleeve, which was frayed and slightly darkened where saber strikes had kissed too close. "This is the formal uniform of the Praxium, reserved for trials, knightings, and official ceremonies." Her voice was quiet, steady, but there was a slight tremor at the edges, the kind that came from nights without sleep and burdens newly set on one's shoulders. It took him a beat to register her meaning. His brow furrowed briefly, and then the grin spread across his face, warm and rare. He extended his arm without hesitation. "Kandosi, from what I know, you've more than earned it." She flushed faintly, but took his arm in the traditional warrior's clasp, wincing as their forearms met. "My arms still sting," she admitted. I think I did well, but I won't have my assignment for a few more days." He released her grip gently, the humor fading to something more grounded. "You've done enough to make it this far. That means something." "Aye." She pulled back her sleeve, revealing the faintly blistered welts across her forearms. Renius didn't go easy. He wasn't meant to. He winced and let out a soft whistle. "Myth. Saber burns on the forearms? That's right." His gaze drifted, distant for a moment. Low power, precision strikes, that was deliberate. He was testing your control. She tilted her head, eyeing him. "How'd you know?" Aran hesitated and then rolled up his own sleeve. A long-heeled burn marked his outer arm, a darkened stretch of skin from elbow to wrist. "Experience," he said simply. "I got that on a strike mission for Kirt Zad. We were after a slicer who'd been erasing command trail records. Turned out he was force-trained. He caught me off guard. Slipped a saber past my gauntlet. 8 went in. 2 came out." She looked at the mark and said nothing for a moment, then softly, "I've never had a wound like that. But I've had something worse." She didn't need to explain. The look in her eyes was enough. Aran felt the shift in her, subtle as breathing. "What's on your mind?" She exhaled slowly. "Laurel, before Bestine, he never laid a hand on me. Not really. Just used a heated knife to cut off my braid. Said that would hurt more than any scar he left." Her voice faltered. He was right. Aran didn't answer at first. He looked back out over the water, his jaw tight. When he did speak, it was with quiet bitterness. "That sounds like him. I worked alongside him a few times, rarely by choice. He liked breaking people, liked watching them unravel. I didn't." "You didn't enjoy it?" "I'm a hunter," he said. "Tracking, predicting, surviving. Not torturing. That was his game." She was quiet, fingers curling into the grass. "I thought no one was coming. Until Ethan and Callista arrived, I started to believe I'd been abandoned." He nodded solemnly. "That's the point. Break the mind. Crush the hope." "And if it happens again?" she asked. "If they take me again? I don't know if I could endure that a second time." "Good," he said, without flinching, "but not without scars. That's the truth of it." She swallowed hard. "Is it something I could learn to withstand?" "Maybe, if you're willing to train for it." "I'd want to, eventually." "Then I'll help. he said simply. If Ethan allows it. He'll have better methods, but I know what it takes. He looked at him with quiet gratitude. You've already helped more than you know. There was a pause as the light shifted and danced across the lake. You know what you'll do now? She asked. He shrugged. I like it here. I'm not sure I have a place anymore, but maybe I'll find one. With you people. She smiled faintly. I think you already have. His gaze met hers, and for once neither looked away. I'll speak to Ethan and Master Card, she said, rising carefully to her feet. But first, rest. I haven't had more than an hour's sleep since yesterday. I'll be here, he said, already leaning back onto the grass, hands behind his head. Not much for walls and ceilings, anyway. He hesitated and then leaned down and squeezed his shoulder. Thank you. She smiled up at her, eyes half-lidded. Recherche me, Marin. She turned towards the Werda, the breeze stirring the hem of her tunic as she disappeared beneath the trees. Ethan sat alone in the main hold of the Werda, seated on one of the reinforced benches near the Dursteel table that had seen its share of field briefings, meal trays, and heated arguments over the years. His arms were folded, his expression unreadable, but his gaze was locked on the closed cabin hatch down the corridor. Hers. He'd heard her come aboard, heard her boots pause just inside the hatch, just for a moment before she'd gone quiet again. Not long after, the familiar footfalls of Jared Algren had followed. Lighter, careful. Ethan hadn't moved. There was no need. He let out a breath, slow and measured, and looked down at the old knife turning between his fingers. The grip was worn from years of use, black and gray, just like the armor Marin used to wear before she'd ever picked up a lightsaber. He taught her to hold this blade when she was barely tall enough to reach the counter. I'd watched her stumble, try again, first in Mandoa when she got it wrong. And now she carried a Jedi's blade, and she was one. He didn't know what cut deeper, his pride or the weight of knowing she didn't need him to watch over her anymore. Jared had taken that role, and Ethan had let him. Not because he wanted to, because Marin had chosen him. Because Stefan, of all people, had looked Jared in the eye and not said no. Ethan twirled the knife once more, catching it neatly by the hilt, and then set it down with a quiet clack. He didn't begrudge Jared the bond. He saw it. Had seen it for years now. The way Marin spoke when Jared entered a room, the way her shoulders eased, flickers of strength that were always there but softened when Jared stood beside her. It wasn't weakness, not with those two. It was balance. But that didn't mean it was easy. He shifted his weight, leaning forward with his elbows on the table and his fingers laced. She hadn't spoken much when she came back from the trial. She hadn't needed to. The stiffness in her walk, the faint lines of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the burn marks along her forearms, barely treated like she hadn't even realized she was bleeding. The braid was gone, severed cleanly at the nape. He didn't ask for details. He just told her to sit, give her water, let her be. And when she finally stood to leave, said she needed a few minutes by the lake before she could sleep. He let her go. That was the other thing about being a father. Knowing when to hold on, and when to let go. Ethan stood slowly, walking towards the narrow viewport at the side of the Werda. The sun caught the edge of the tree line, glinting off the lake below. Somewhere out there, a Ran had been watching the water, same as always. A hard man, quiet, but not lost. Not anymore. That was Marin's doing. He watched for a moment longer and then turned back toward the corridor. Jared had closed her door. Good. Let her sleep. Let her rest while someone she trusted stood watch. Ethan sat back down at the table and picked up the knife again, this time turning it with a bit more purpose in his grip. He didn't need to be in that room. He'd always made his peace. He'd already made his peace. She was strong. She had family. And if anyone came for her again, Deathwatch, the Sith, or anything worse, they would find out one thing real quick. She didn't stand alone. Not ever. Not while Ethan Bevan still drew breath. Okay. Late afternoon, Marin's cabin. The hum of the ship was steady beneath her, a low, familiar vibration that once had lulled her to sleep during long jumps through hyperspace, but this time it was different. This time she hadn't even remembered falling asleep. Marin stirred slightly, her brow creasing against the soft pull of waking. Her body protested the motion, her arms ached, saber welts and tension still simmering beneath her skin. The muscles along her shoulders and back felt like they'd locked into place sometime during the night. Or afternoon? She blinked slowly, vision blurred with sleep, and inhaled deeply. The scent of the sheets was familiar. Clean linen and faint traces of oil from the cleaning kit she kept by the door. But there was something else, too. Something that grounded her immediately. Jared. She shifted slightly. There was warmth pressed against her back, a steady rhythm of breath. One arm draped across her waist, protective but loose. Not possessive, just there. She didn't startle. Not this time. Not with him. Marin closed her eyes again, letting herself sink into the sensation. It had been so long since she'd let her guard down like this, since she'd let herself be held. And somehow he knew not to speak yet. Not until she did. Her voice came softly, rasped from sleep. You carried me. His breath stirred her hair. You passed out standing. What was I supposed to do? Let you slump over on the floor like a sack of supplies? She smirked, her eyes still closed. Might have made for a good lesson. Don't challenge Rinius on sore arms and no sleep. Jared shifted behind her slightly, his voice lower now. I figured you'd earned at least a bed after all that. Ethan didn't stop me. That made her eyes open. He saw you carry me in? Saw me pick you up, Jared replied, quiet but honest. He didn't say anything, just nodded once and turned back to his knife. Marin was silent for a long moment, her fingers curled lightly over the edge of the blanket. He's not angry? Jared let out a breath. I think he's tired. But no, not angry. Maybe not thrilled either, but he knows. He's known for a while. Her voice was soft now. I just never knew how to say it. You didn't have to. Jared's hand found hers beneath the blanket, fingers threading through hers with the kind of ease that only came after long years of friendship, hardship, and something deeper. Oh my word! Lord Tanky, welcome in! Can I get a shout out for Lord Tanky, please? Oh, it automatically did that. Welcome in, Lord Tanky. It's good to see you. That always scares me.
Lord Tanky rated my stream with 2 viewers.
Welcome in, Lord Tanky. It's good to see you. I took my friends over to hang out with you the other day, and I'm glad to see you here. We are reading today. I know. That's scary. It scares me every time, which is kind of the whole point. We've been dealing with jump scares all night. It's nothing new today. So I am reading tonight. So pull up a chair, grab a blanket, grab a snack, get comfy, because we're not done yet. So yes, very chill vibes. Okay, we have an ad starting in a minute and 48 seconds, so I'm gonna read this passage and then probably go BRB for the ad. I try to keep track of those. You didn't have to. Jared's hand found hers beneath the blanket, fingers threading through hers with the kind of ease that only came after long years of friendship, hardship, and something deeper they'd never dared to name aloud until recently. You always showed it. She turned her head slightly, enough to meet his gaze. They were half-lidded, a little heavy with sleep, but warm, open. Stayed. You needed rest. She gave him a look. He returned it, unbothered. You always fight until your legs give out. Someone's gotta be there when they do. A faint laugh broke from her lips. What would the council say if they knew? She raised an eyebrow. That I made sure a fellow knight didn't fall out of her bunk. Fellow knight, she whispered, testing the words. Jared smiled, watching the realization settle over her again like morning sun. You earned it. Every step of the way. No council can take that. She reached up and touched the spot where her braid had been, that place where Andrea had cut it, clean and ceremonial, the old Catania way. Her chest tightened, but it wasn't grief. Not this time. It was peace. Did I say thank you? She asked softly. You were half conscious. You tried to tell the corridor wall. He laughed. Truly laughed, and felt his arm tighten slightly around her as if to hold the sound in place. Silence settled again, this time comfortable. Familiar, then softer than before, she whispered. You didn't have to stay. I wanted to, he said, without hesitation. And I'm going to stop right there because we're about to be in an ad, so I will be back. Go get a drink of water. Welcome back, everybody. Even with Ethan pacing the hold? Jared smiled, brushing a bit of hair back from her face. He stopped pacing when you exhaled. I think that was enough for him. Marin exhaled again, now slower, letting go of the tension still hiding in her ribs. I don't want to wake up like this every time, she murmured, half broken, chasing sleep like it's a mission. He didn't answer for a moment. Then, don't, he said simply. Wake up whole. I'll be here either way. She turned her face towards his chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in days, Marinderza slept deeply. Evening. The observation alcove. The stars hung still beyond the viewport, glowing in muted brilliance as the soft lights of the warder's upper deck cast gentle warmth across the Durasteel floor. Marin sat curled on the built-in bench beneath the window, her legs drawn close beneath her, wrapped in the same deep blue tunic and black pants she'd worn during her trials. Yes. Her hands were clasped loosely around a steaming cup of herbal tea. Callista's doing something calming, something warm. Jared sat quietly beside her, one arm resting across the back of the bench. He wasn't touching her, not right now, but his presence was enough. Grounding. Solid. He offered no words, and she didn't need them. Across from her, Ethan and Callista shared the other bench. He'd shed his heavier armor, wearing only his flight suit and boots. A blanket draped over one shoulder. The collar was open at the throat, rare for him, and an old scar across his collarbone caught a glint of light when he shifted. Callista sat close beside him, her hand tucked into his. He looked more like a sentinel than a healer tonight, quiet, calm, and watching. Marin broke the silence first. I always thought I'd feel different when it was over. Ethan looked over at her, his expression unreadable for a long moment. And then he asked simply, "Do you?" She tilted her head, thinking. I think I expected to feel sharper, like something would click into place and I'd know what I was supposed to do next. You already do, Callista said softly. You just don't realize it yet. I thought I'd be something else. Marin's voice was low. Something closer to what my father was. But I'm still me. That's exactly why you passed, Ethan murmured. You didn't try to be him. You didn't try to be Stefan, or Andrea, or me. Jared glanced towards her then, the corner of his mouth lifting faintly. You were Marin Durza. That's always been enough. She didn't answer at first. Just let her gaze drift across the room, past Ethan, past Callista, toward the stars. He was there, she said finally, at the end of the ceremony. I didn't say anything earlier because I didn't want to read too much into it, but Stefan saw him too. Callista's expression softened. Serious? Marin nodded slowly. Not for long, just long enough. I think he was proud, but it hurt. That's what happens when you carry the weight of someone's legacy, Ethan said gruffly, but not unkindly. It carves into you, even when you do everything right. Marin looked toward him, her eyes tired but clear. Did I do everything right? Ethan held her gaze. You endured. You didn't break. You learned from what tried to break you. That's more than most. She exhaled, a slow, heavy breath. Callista leaned forward slightly. You're not done. None of us are, but the path you're walking now, it's yours. Not Jarius's, not mine, not Ethan's, and not the Council's. It's both, she said softly. Mandalorian and Jedi, it always has been. Ethan gave a slow nod. You're my daughter. That's all that matters to me. There was no flourish to the words, no need for a speech, just quiet conviction. Jared shifted closer then. This time his hand found hers, threading fingers without needing permission. She let him. She leaned into it. I don't know what's coming, Marin admitted. I keep feeling like something's moving beneath all of this, like there's something we haven't seen yet. Ethan's brow furrowed. Callista exchanged a look with him and then turned back to Marin. Then we face it together, she said. You're not alone, Ithaca. Marin smiled faintly at the word. I know. She let her head rest lightly against Jared's shoulder. Outside, the stars blinked silently. The water held still above Ctan's gentle horizon, and for this one moment between trials past and battles not yet begun, Marin Durza rested in the quiet between. The lights had dimmed. The soft blue hue of the consoles cast faint reflections on the transparent steel. The only movement was a slow, rhythmic blinking of indicators in the deeper shadows of stars beyond. Callista stood near the forward viewport, arms crossed loosely, her expression unreadable as she watched the darkness stretch towards infinity. She didn't turn when she heard Ethan's footsteps behind her. He stopped beside her, silent for a long moment. She finally slept, he said. Callista nodded faintly. I felt her ease. It didn't come quickly. He grunted softly in agreement and folded his arms across his chest, shoulder brushing hers. You were right. She needed to see him, her father, even if it was just a flicker. Callista's voice was quiet. We both know the dead don't linger for no reason. Was it the Force? Ethan asked, looking towards her now, or just memory? I don't think it matters, she said. He was there for her. She needed to believe he saw who she had become. Ethan nodded slowly. And what do you think he saw? Callista turned to look at him then. Her gaze held no judgment, only truth. He saw his daughter, not his shadow. That's the difference. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. He looked away. I trained her like a warrior because I thought that's what she needed. I didn't want her soft. I didn't want her vulnerable. She needed both, Callista said gently. I know. He rested his hands on the back of one of the chairs, his fingers curling against the metal, tight, and then relaxed. She's not a child anymore, he said. Part of me keeps looking at her like I did when I found her, shaking, when Card and I found her on Tanagas after Jarius was killed, still clutching that knife like she could take on the whole Criffing galaxy. Callista's voice was almost a whisper. And now? He exhaled. Now? I think she could. They stood in silence for a long moment. Callista shifted, then, her hand brushing his lightly before settling over it. You were hard on her, but you were there, when no one else was, and when she needed it most. Ethan didn't reply right away. His eyes remained fixed on the stars, but his hand turned slightly beneath hers and his grip tightened. Not hard, just certain. She's going to go back into it, he said, finally. Back into the dark. There's something coming. I can feel it in her. His tone didn't waver. Then we'll be ready. He looked at her. And when we're not? She smiled softly. We stand with her anyway. He held her gaze, and for the first time in a long time, some of the tension slipped from his shoulders. She deserves peace, he said. She'll have it, Callista replied, her voice firm. But she'll find it. Her way. Ethan nodded slowly. He looked once more towards the corridor, towards the hatch that led back to Marin's cabin. She's more like Jarius than I realized, he said. No, Callista said. She's more than him. And together they stood in the silence, two warriors who had fought through the fire and returned not unscarred, but whole enough to watch the next one rise. And that is the end of chapter 9. You guys, how we doing? You guys doing alright? Okay. Okay. Well, I might get this done by 10 o'clock. We'll find out. We will find out. Oh, maybe. Baton, the Card Estate landing pad. The shadows had stretched long across the grass when Marin found him. Ethan was where she often found him these days, leaning against the hull of the Werda, arms crossed, one knee drawn up and braced casually against the landing strut. He wasn't doing anything in particular, just watching the trees, listening to the bird song and the wind through the needles, guarding in his own way. Marin approached quietly, her bare feet whispering in the dust. She wore one of her older tunics today, a pale cream top with wide sleeves paired with a teal skirt that brushed her knees when she walked. It was simple, comfortable, something from home, but her expression was far from restful. Ethan's gaze shifted the moment she stepped into view. He saw the tightness in her shoulders, the hesitation, the set to her jaw that hadn't been there earlier. You look like you've got something to say, Marika, he said simply. She stopped a few feet from him and folded her arms, hugging herself tightly. I do, she said quietly. Can I talk to you? Ethan nodded and gestured to the crate beside him. Sit. She lowered herself down without argument, adjusting her skirt slightly as she folded her hands in her lap. For a moment, she stared at the ground. Ethan waited. I talked to Aran, she said, finally. His brow rose slightly. About what? Marin didn't answer right away. She reached up and brushed a bit of hair behind her ear, exhaling slowly. About Laurel, she said. And Basine. About how it felt. Ethan's eyes darkened, but he said nothing. I asked him about resistance training, she continued. Psychological defense, interrogation techniques, how to survive them. He said it's possible, but it's hard. And painful. Now Ethan spoke. And you want that kind of training? Yes. There was no hesitation in her voice. Ethan's arms crossed tighter over his chest. Why? Marin looked up, meeting his gaze. Because I can't go through something like that again without being ready. I survived. Barely. But next time I want to fight it, inside, not just with a saber. She dropped her gaze to the ground. He said it would mean recreating the conditions. Sensory deprivation, mental strain, isolation. And you think that's wise? Ethan asked. His voice wasn't angry, just low, quiet. After everything you just came through? No, he admitted, but I think it's necessary. Ethan leaned back against the strut and stared at the sky where the clouds were glowing gold. I trained you to fight, he said after a while, to endure, to bend without breaking, but there's a line, Baron. I know, she whispered, but if I don't cross it on my own terms, someone else will drag me there. His eyes flicked back to her. I want to do this because I'm still afraid, she said, her voice shaking only a little, and because I don't want to be next time. I won't go into that kind of darkness again without armor I built myself. Ethan was silent for a long while. When he finally moved, it was to sit beside her. Slowly, like the weight he carried pressed heavier now than ever before. I hate that you need this, he said, almost more to himself than her, but I couldn't stop it before. You got there, she said softly. You and Callista. That's the only reason I'm still here. Ethan looked at her then, really looked, and then in a quiet voice that betrayed the steel underneath, he asked, Who do you want to train you? I asked Aran first, Merritt said honestly, because he understands. He's been through it. Ethan grunted. That's what I was afraid of. But I trust him, she added, and I trust you. I'd rather the two of you talk about it before I do anything. He looked at her again. You're serious about this? She nodded only once. He exhaled, slow and resigned. Then he reached over and cupped the back of her neck, drawing her forehead lightly to his. I'm not saying yes, he murmured. Not yet, but I'll talk to him. She nodded again, barely more than a breath. Thank you. And for a little while, they just sat like that, side by side in the deepening quiet, guardian and ward, warrior and daughter. The wind whispered past the trees. Somewhere the stars were beginning to shine. I need water again. Wow, sorry. Losing my voice. Card Estate Veranda, the next day. The afternoon had begun to drift into quiet gold when Aran found him. Ethan stood at the edge of the veranda, his posture deceptively at ease as he watched the wind ripple across the lake below. The warder sat silent on the pad just beyond the trees, its silhouette familiar against the mountains beyond. Somewhere inside, Marin slept. Jared hadn't left her side. Sorry, I'm totally losing my voice now. Aran hesitated before stepping into view. Ethan didn't look over. You're not bad at walking quietly, he said, but I'm not a jetty. I don't need the force to know when someone's coming up behind me. Aran inclined his head slightly. I didn't mean to sneak. You didn't, Ethan replied. Still, his eyes didn't leave the water. If you've come to talk, you might as well get on with it. Aran stepped forward. The earth crunched faintly beneath his boots. It's about Marin, he said. I got a slight glance from Ethan, though he said nothing. She asked me earlier about training, not with a saber, not Mando drills. Aran drew in a breath. He asked how to resist interrogation, psychological torture, mental breaking. A sharp silence followed. The wind blew low and steady through the trees. I see, Ethan said finally. She remembers what Laurel did to her, Aran added, softer now. The knife, the braid. She knows there's a chance it could happen again. Ethan turns now, the full weight of his gaze settling on Aran. You think I don't know that? No, I think you know it better than any of us. There was a pause. She's already survived more than anyone should have to, Ethan said. Oh my goodness, I'm really... Just give me a sec. Maybe? Give me a sec, guys. Yes, I did. Sorry. Forgot to unmute myself. Okay. I totally did because I was like clearing my throat. It was really loud. Yeah. I'm gonna pick up back here, okay? She's already survived more than anyone should have to, Ethan said. She doesn't need to relive it. Aren didn't flinch. But if it happens again, she needs to be able to endure it, not just survive. Endure. That's what she asked. Ethan exhaled slowly, folding his arms. You offering to train her? Yes. What would it involve? Aren didn't answer right away. Mental discipline, sensory stress, deprivation, situational reconstructions. Nothing permanent, but real enough. Ethan's jaw flexed. I did my best to keep that kind of training away from her. I know. That's why she's asking now. She should never have needed it. But she does. They stood in silence a moment longer. She's not ready yet, Ethan said. She just passed her trials. The scars are still fresh, even if she hides them well. Why I haven't pushed. I told her to talk to you first. She said she would. She did, Ethan murmured. Another silence stretched between them. Behind them, Callista's voice could be heard faintly through the veranda's open door. She was speaking softly. Perhaps to Renius or Dylan. Ethan didn't move. She asked, You, he said after a moment. Not me, not Callista. You. Welcome back to Sniper. I think because she knows I've been through it. I wasn't trained as a Jedi. What I learned was rough, but it kept me alive. It might keep her alive too. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, something had changed. You hurt her. I won't. You scare her. I leave. Ethan studied him hard, the silence drawn tight. Fine, he said. But not yet. You wait until I say she's ready. Aren nodded once. Understood. And if you're lying, if this is some buried Deathwatch Ossic you haven't shaken, then you'll put me down yourself, Aren said, without hesitation. I'd expect nothing less. Ethan turned away, hand gripping the railing of the veranda again. The breeze picked up. For a long while, neither of them spoke. Tell her, Ethan said, his voice lower now. When the time comes, she can do it. Just not alone. Aren glanced sideways. He wasn't planning to let her face it alone. Ethan nodded once, and then, without looking at him again, he spoke. She's my daughter, and that, more than anything, was permission. Sorry. The veranda door stood ajar, a breeze slipping in and carrying with it the faint scent of pine and the hush of settling dusk. Callista leaned against the edge of the frame, one hand wrapped around a ceramic cup gone cool with forgotten tea. The inside of the card estate was dim now, the light deliberately low in the common room where she stood. Just enough to keep from casting glare on the glass. Through the door, just beyond the low railing, she could see Ethan and Aren. They hadn't raised their voices, not once, but she could feel the weight of the conversation from here, pressing into her chest like gravity turned sideways. Ethan stood, arms folded, one shoulder braced against a support beam. His stance was rigid, one Callista knew well. Defensive, guarded, already trying to push back against something he couldn't shield Marin from. Aran sat on the edge of the stone bench, elbows on his knees. He wasn't armored. He rarely wore it around the estate. But there was still something coiled beneath the surface, always alert, always waiting. His voice, though low, was steady. I told her it wasn't something to rush into, Aran was saying, and I still believe that. But she's not wrong to ask. Ethan exhaled through his nose, and Callista saw the flick of his eyes to the trees before he responded. I know that, he said. I knew it the moment she brought it to me. Doesn't mean I have to like it. She trusts you, Aran said simply. That's why she told you first. She trusts you, too, Ethan returned. His tone edged, but not angry. Just tired, and I'm trying to decide if that's a good thing. That made Aran pause. He didn't argue the point. He just nodded slowly and looked down at his hands. Callista stepped closer to the door but didn't move through it. This was their conversation, for now. But the silence between them wasn't just awkward, it was familiar. Like two soldiers walking the same ruined path and realizing they'd been there at different times. She shouldn't have to learn this, Ethan said, quietly, finally. Not this young. Aran glanced up. You think I don't know that? I grew up on the other side of it. I saw what Kirzad did to kids they thought needed breaking in, what they made us watch. She doesn't need what I had, but she's asking how to survive the people who do it, and that I can help with. Ethan was silent. Callista shifted slightly, her fingertips grazing the wood of the doorframe. She remembered Marin's scream the night she'd collapsed after Bastine, the trembling in her arms, the scars, emotional, invisible, carved just beneath the surface. She remembered Ethan carrying her from the landing pad into the house and how he hadn't let go until her vital stabilized. She remembered how long he'd sat there after. Outside, Aran straightened slightly. I won't do anything without her full consent, or yours. But if she asks again, I'll be honest with her, and if she still wants it, I'll start small, light, just enough to get her footing. If she can't handle it, we stop. Ethan's jaw worked once, then again, and then he nodded. You'll keep it small, and you'll tell me everything. Aran nodded. Of course. And if I get even the slightest sense that she's slipping, you'll be the first to know, Aran interrupted. I promise you that. There was another silence. It stretched longer this time. And then Ethan turned away from the railing and stepped inside. He didn't flinch when he saw Callista. He just looked at her with that same world-weary steadiness he'd worn since Marin was 13 and their lives began breaking open one scar at a time. She's too much like Jarius, he said simply. Callista reached for his hand. No, he replied softly. He's stronger. We're about a little less than halfway through the chapter, just heads up. The hum of the word of systems was low and steady, soothing even. Oh, sorry. It reminded her of the rhythm of breath during meditation or the quiet songs of the wind across the Durza estate when the trees were still. Marin stirred beneath the blanket, not quite ready to rise but no longer resting either. She blinked slowly at the dim light overhead, her senses half lost between memory and waking. Jared had brought her here. She remembered the warmth of his arms, how carefully he'd carried her to the small sleeping berth after she'd come back from the lake. How he hadn't said a word when she'd finally let go. Her last thought before sleep had been of Jarius, standing across from her in the torchlight of the Praxim's courtyard. His armor faded in gray-blue, his voice soft. You already know the path. She hadn't told Jared everything. Not yet. The vision was too raw, too close to the surface, like a blade not yet cooled. She exhaled slowly and sat up, running her hand across her face. The tunic she wore, the deep blue of the Praxium's formal wear, was slightly wrinkled, creased at the sleeves from where she'd curled in on herself in sleep. The braid was gone. She reached instinctively for it and touched on the air. Her fingertips grazed her shoulder where the familiar weight used to fall. That small loss hurt more than she expected. She rose and moved quietly into the common area of the Werda. The ship was still, its lights dimmed in standby mode. Through the viewport, she could just make out the lake, its surface like black glass. And on the distant shore, figure sat, still, waiting. Aran, she could feel his presence, low and steady. Not intrusive, just near, watchful. Her footsteps were nearly silent as she padded towards the ramp. She stopped just before lowering it. Through the glass, she could see Ethan now, pacing near the edge of the estate veranda. He wasn't looking for her, not yet, but something about the line of his posture told her everything she needed to know. They had talked. Her request hadn't been dismissed. Aran had likely made his case. And Ethan had listened. She felt a twist of guilt coil in her chest. And I'm going to stop there because we're about to be in an ad. I will see you guys in a minute and a half. Go get a drink of water. Have a stretch. Take care of yourselves. Alright. Sorry about that. That took a little bit longer than I planned. Alright. I also went to get snacks. Because reasons. Alright. Marin, came a voice behind her, soft and a little groggy. Jared. She turned slightly and saw him framed in the doorway to her cabin, hair tousled, tunic wrinkled, one hand braced against the frame. His saber hung loose at his side. I didn't mean to wake you, she murmured. You didn't. He stepped closer, bare feet against the cool deck plating. You okay? He nodded, but it wasn't really convincing. I think they're talking about it, she said. Ethan and Iran. About what I asked. Jared's brow knit slightly. You sure you want to go through with it? No, she admitted, her voice quiet. But I know I need to. He studied her face for a long time. You don't have to prove anything. I'm not trying to, she replied gently. This isn't about legacy, or titles, or showing them I'm strong enough. It's about surviving, if it happens again. Her eyes met his then, and there was no fear in them, only certainty. I won't break again, Jared. Not like before. He reached out and touched her hand. You didn't break, he said. You endured. Maren closed her eyes and let that settle in her chest. Outside, the lake caught a streak of moonlight, pale and silver across the surface. Promise, or maybe a warning. She wasn't sure which. But she would be ready. The hum of the Word's systems was low and steady, soothing, even. It reminded her of the rhythm of breath during meditation or the quiet songs of the... Whoops. Give me 1 sec. I actually did... I put something in there that I already had in there. Give me 1 sec. There we go. There was an extra copy of a scene in it. My bad. August 5, the Northern Mountains. The Derza Estate. The sky had gone gold at the edges. Light filtered across in low... Oh, sorry. Light filtered in low across the pines, catching on the metal fixtures of the estate's outer deck. Just enough to gild the rails in bronze. It was quiet now, the kind of silence that Snagus offered before the wind began to rise off the cliffs. Stillness before the night. Before storms, before anything new. Maren sat on the edge of the veranda with one leg curled under her, the other dangling lazily over the step. She wore a slate-gray skirt and a deep teal tunic that fluttered gently in the breeze. Soft, local fabric, the kind that marked her as of Catan, but made her feel like herself. Her boots were set aside on the stones beside her, and a mug of half-finished tea rested beside them, steam long since gone. She heard the door open before she sensed him. Ethan stepped out onto the stones with no sound at all, not even the usual clink of his boots. His shoulder had His shoulder had healed well from a recent injury, though Maren could tell he was still favoring it. And tonight, he wasn't. That told her something. You're going to catch cold, he said, his voice low and even. Maren half smiled. Didn't think you cared about things like that. I care about things that'll leave you sneezing through your own training, he grunted, but there was no heat in it. He came to stand beside her, looking out over the pines that tumbled downward towards the forest basin. The valley where the old roads ran, the ones her father used to walk, the ones she once patrolled before everything. Maren didn't speak at first. She let the silence sit between them, and Ethan didn't break it. Not until she shifted and looked up at him, her gaze clear and steady. I want to start soon, she said, with Iran. Ethan didn't move, not even to nod. I've thought about it, she continued. I've sat with it, meditated on it, and I've talked with Jared again. I'm not doing this out of fear. I'm doing it because it's time I stopped fearing the idea of it. I want to be ready. He let the words settle like stone. Solid, unshaken. Finally, Ethan sat down next to her with a slow exhale, one knee drawn up so he could rest an arm across it. He looked older in the gold light, not tired, just weathered, like someone who'd carried too many names and couldn't quite let go of any of them. I don't like it, he said quietly. I know. I don't trust him yet. I know that, too. Ethan tilted his head slightly, looking sideways at her. But I trust you. That landed harder than she expected. Her throat tightened for just a moment. He continued, You've made your choices, and you've made them with your eyes open, and you've got better instincts than most. You think this is something you need to do. I'll back you. Maren didn't speak right away. She blinked slowly, watching the line of light shift across the horizon. You always said I'd be tested again, she murmured. Ethan nodded. And you will be, in ways I can't prepare you for. But if this is the path you choose, if this is how you get there, I'll see that you have the space to walk it. Maren turned her hand palm up on the wood beside her, and after a second he laid his over it. No words passed between them. There didn't need to be any. When she finally stood, she turned towards him and bowed slightly at the waist. Not Jedi formality, not a military salute, just a gesture of respect, shaped by something older, something from both of her fathers. Ethan gave a slight grunt. Don't expect me to go easy on him if he screws this up. Maren smirked faintly. I wouldn't dream of it. She turned and stepped inside, her bare feet silent on the stone. And outside, the last rays of sun dipped behind the cliffs. Ethan stayed where he was, watching the trees, waiting. Georgia Estate, hearthroom, evening. The fire was low, burning in slow, steady pulses, the kind of light that cast long shadows across the carved stone walls and made the old hardwood floors glow like amber. It was the kind of evening that brought quiet with it, earned quiet, not the forced kind that followed after loss. Maren sat curled into the corner of the long bench beneath the window. She was wrapped in one of the woven katani shawls, her legs tucked up beneath her skirt, her tunic loose and comfortable again after days in more formal wear. A cup of spiced tea sat forgotten on the low table near her knee, steam curling faintly. Callista sat in the chair nearest the fire, legs crossed, posture relaxed but attentive. A book rested in her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in some time. She was watching Maren in that quiet way she had, saying nothing, waiting for the words to come. Jaren had taken his place beside Maren. He hadn't spoken since she settled there, but his presence was a comfort she didn't need to name. I used to dream of this, Maren said at last, her voice so soft it was almost swallowed by the flames. When I was little, for Bastine, for everything. Callista's head tilted slightly. What did you dream? Maren stared out the window into the forest, her hand flexing against the edge of the shawl. A place that felt safe. Not the kind they built with bunkers and weapons, just a place where I could be myself and not have to keep earning it. Somewhere I wasn't just the girl who survived. Jared was quiet before answering. You earned it anyway. She looked at him and found that he wasn't teasing. Not tonight. Callista's smile was faint, but warm. You always earned it, Spiarica. You just didn't believe us when we said so. Maren looked down at her hands. The burn marks on her arms had faded, but the memory of the duel still lingered in her joints. I don't know what comes next. Not exactly. I know something's coming. I feel it. Jared nodded, and his voice was careful. We all do. I want to be ready, she said, barely more than a whisper, but I don't know what that means yet. Callista set her book aside and leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on her knees. It means you live. You train. You stay grounded. You love. And you fight. And you keep listening to the Force, and when the storm breaks, as it will, you choose who you are in that moment. That's all any of us can ever really do. Maren closed her eyes. You make it sound so easy. It's never easy, Callista said gently, but it's simple. Jared leaned against her a little, shoulder to shoulder. You don't have to do any of it alone. I know. Maren reached for his hand without looking, her fingers curling into his. That's what scares me. finally have something to lose. Callista didn't answer that, not with words. She simply stood and crossed the room and then gently rested her hand on Marin's head for a long moment, like she had when Marin was younger, wild with grief or pain. "You'll be all right," she said quietly. "Even if things fall apart, you'll still be you." Marin leaned her head against Callista's side just for a moment and let her eyes fall closed. The kind of silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of years of grief and strength. When Callista stepped away at last, she only said, "I'll make some tea. You two stay as long as you need." And then she vanished down the hall, her soft footfalls swallowed by the mountain home. Jared shifted to rest his arm around Marin's shoulders, gently pulling her closer. "You scared me, you know. That night you came back from the trials. You looked like you were carrying the whole war on your back again." "I was," Marin murmured, "but just for a little while." He kissed the top of her head. "Don't carry it alone next time." "I won't," she whispered, and for a while neither of them said anything else. The fire burned low, the storm waited beyond the stars, but for now, the night was still. The kitchen was warm from the day's use, though the coals in the hearth had begun to settle. Callista moved with familiar ease, not bothering to activate the light panels. She preferred the dim, let it stay quiet for now. The kettle was already filled from earlier, and she set it back over the coils with practiced care, her movements unhurried. She stood still for a long moment after that, her hands resting on the stone counter as she looked out the narrow window. The forest outside had long since vanished into darkness. Stars above the trees blinked faintly, half obscured by thin mountain mist. She didn't sigh. She didn't need to. Everything about her posture said she was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. The kind that came from watching someone you loved walk a path that led into shadow, and knowing you could only guide from a distance. "She's grown up," a voice whispered in her mind. Not Ethan's. Not Marin's. Just the echo of her own heart. Too fast. Callista closed her eyes for a moment and pressed her hand over her chest, but the fabric of her tunic still bore a subtle threadwork emblem. Jedi, not Mandalorian. Her own path had once seemed clearer, but in Marin that path had always bent and blurred and reformed into something new. She thought of Bastine, of the scorched armor they pulled from the wreckage, of the way Ethan had screamed, of Jared, staring at the empty space where Marin was until they found her. She thought of the moment Marin returned, how she didn't cry, just stood in silence and accepted the grief that others carried in her name. Callista opened her eyes. She'd watched that girl fall apart and rebuild herself more times than she could count, and each time something finer remained. The kettle began to hiss softly. She reached for the mugs, lined them up without thought, prepared the tea the way Marin liked it, spiced, just a touch of honey, strong enough to burn through a clouded mind. She made 2 more without asking, one for Jared, and because she knew the rhythm of the house, one for Ethan. She didn't flinch when she heard his footsteps behind her. "You saw her?" he asked gruffly. Callista didn't turn around. Still with Jared. They were talking. Ethan was silent for a moment, then he muttered, "She's holding more than she lets on." "She always has." "I should have stopped her from asking Iran about that training." Callista turned, holding out a mug. He didn't take it right away. "She's not a child anymore," she said gently. "And you didn't fail her, Ethan. She's not asking because she's afraid. She's asking because she wants to survive what's coming." He took the tea at last, but his brow furrowed. "What if I can't protect her this time?" Callista didn't answer with comfort or empty words. She set the last mug aside for Jared and stepped in close, pressing her free hand to his arm. "She's not yours to protect anymore," she said quietly. "Not the way she was. She's becoming what she was always meant to be. That doesn't mean we leave her. It means we stand behind her, catch her if she falls." He didn't look at her, but he didn't walk away either. The tea steamed between them, a soft whisper in the quiet. "She saw Jarius," Callista said after a long pause, "after her trials. She said it didn't hurt this time." Ethan's eyes finally turned to hers. That's how I knew she was ready, Callista whispered. He nodded once, quietly, and then they stood in silence, side by side, as the mountain wind stirred the forest outside. The fire was low but steady, casting long shadows across the thick rugs and carved stone walls. Callista entered without a word, the tray balanced easily in her hands. Maren looked up from the couch, curled onto one side beneath a woven blanket, her freshly cut braid gone, her short hair tousled. Jared sat beside her, one hand resting lightly on her ankle where it poked from beneath the blanket. He looked up as well, eyes a little tired but calm. I brought tea, Callista said softly. You always do, Maren murmured, the corner of her mouth lifting just enough to be called a smile. She reached up and took her mug as Callista passed it to her. Her mug, the chipped one. It smelled faintly of spiced berry, the blend Callista had helped her sleep. Jared accepted his without speaking. His fingers brushed hers in the exchange. Just a glance, but enough. Callista set her own down and lowered herself into the chair across from them with a faint sigh. The kind that came not from weariness, but from knowing you were exactly where you were meant to be. Outside, the wind stirred again. The trees near the North Ridge whispered like old friends. For a time, none of them spoke. The hearth popped quietly. Maren sipped slowly, both hands curled around the warmth. Her eyes had drifted halfway shut. She's doing better, Jared said finally, his voice pitched low, meant for them alone. Callista nodded, but her gaze levered enough to Maren. She is. The girl, no, the young woman, had gone to the edge and clawed her way back. Even now, Callista could see how the scars had shaped her, how she had learned to live with them. Maren didn't speak, but she didn't need to. She'd shifted enough to lean lightly on Jared's side. His arm instinctively settled across her shoulders. She didn't flinch. She didn't pull away. A moment later, the door to the hall opened again. Ethan's boots made no sound on the rug, but Callista felt him as soon as he entered. He paused, just inside, his arms folded, gaze drifting to Maren. There was something unreadable behind his eyes. Tension. Guilt, maybe. But also something quieter. Protective. She's asleep? He asked. Voice gravel rough from disuse. Not yet, Maren murmured without opening her eyes. Her lips twitched. You're not as stealthy as you think, Beware. That coaxed a ghost of a smirk from Ethan. He crossed the room slowly, pulled a floor cushion over beside the couch, and sat down, elbow braced on one knee. Callista passed him the last mug. Still warm. He grunted something that might have been thanks. Then, after a moment, did she tell you she almost broke Renese's block during the trial? Jared chuckled softly, shifting to let Maren rest more comfortably against him. She told me. He wasn't expecting that cross-step feint. I learned it from you, Maren said without opening her eyes. Ethan huffed. No, you learned it from Callista. I just helped you stop falling over. Callista smiled faintly and sipped her tea. Fire crackled. Silence was companionable now. Woven between the warmth and flicker of light, the memories shared without being spoken aloud. For tonight, there were no plans, no briefings, no shadows chasing them. Only this. Family. Hey, look at that. Perfect timing. And we're done. At least for now. Whew. Yeah. So, that is chapters 7 through 10. I backed up to chapter 7 because I had combined chapters a little bit. I know. I almost lost my voice like halfway through chapter 8. Oh my goodness. How are you guys feeling? I don't know about you, but that was a lot. It was quite a lot. I hope you guys enjoyed. I don't know if I feel up to reading out tonight. It's been a long day, but I could try. See if we got anybody. Oh. What do you guys think? You want to come back for more later? Okay. Mm. Excuse me, sorry. Hey, the sniper, can you tell me if DJ Magic Mike has raiding turned on? Because one of the last times I tried to raid him, I could not actually do that. So if you could do me a favor and tell me if he's got raiding turned on. I could try it though. Let's see, is it gonna let me? Oh, it looks like it might actually.
We are greatly honored by your visit, ambassadors. Make
Oh my
yourselves
goodness!
comfortable. My
Jay
master
Wolf,
will
thank
be
you for
with
the
you shortly.
follow. Thank you for daily vocabulary. I was gonna say, Jay Wolf, like, how have you not been here before? G-Train. Can I get a shout out for G-Train and Jay Wolf? I think you stream. I don't recall. I'm actually finishing the stream, so thank you. I don't know. Thank you guys, appreciate it. And we got wow. Okay, everybody's piling in my chat.
Make yourselves comfortable.
Oh,
My
you
master will
guys.
be with you shortly.
Don't break my my shoutouts. Wow. Just as I'm finishing too. All right. Daily vocabulary. G-Train. Okay. Oh. See, what word did I use a lot in my reading today? Oh yeah. Okay. I got a vocabulary word for you. All right. As most of you who are frequent here will know, I use a lot of Mandoa words in my stories because I have at least the main character that I'm focusing on right now is Mandalorian. So I use a lot of Mandoa words depending on who's speaking. So our vocabulary word for today is buir, which is, it means parent. It's inferred to mean either mother or father. A lot of the gender terms in Mandoa are actually neutral, which is actually kind of interesting. So buir would mean parent, but it could also mean mother or father. That is your vocabulary word for the day. Enjoy. Yeah. Of course you had to make it 69. Of course you did. Okay. Let me check my schedule here. 1 second. Just seeing when I'm streaming next. Alright. So my next scheduled stream, for anybody who's curious, is going to be next Wednesday, and that will be SWTOR. Play SWTOR every other Wednesday, and alternate with Storytime, which is what we're doing tonight. And every other Sunday, I do writing workshops. Which, there we go. Camera's being a bit weird. Every other Sunday, I do writing workshops, which I actually just did one, Sunday. Because they happen on the Sunday before I read. So, I will not be streaming again until Wednesday. So if you guys would like to come hang out, you're more than welcome to do that and watch me get killed a lot. Although we did pretty well last week with the content that we were doing. So my guild has a really solid group of people and they know what they're doing. We did it really well. So I'm gonna raid out to DJ Magic Mike. Actually, you know what? Wait 1 sec. I was just looking at. Yeah, I'm gonna raid out to DJ Magic Mike, I think. Let me find him again in my list of people. Oh, we're about to be in an ad too, so I'll be right back. Alright, guys. So we are going to go say hi to DJ Magic Mike, who is pretty chill, and have some good vibes to end our night. So I would really appreciate if you guys could hang around and tag along. For those of you who are subscribed to the channel, that first raid message is for you. And for anybody else who is following the channel, feel free to grab that second one. And we're gonna go say hi to DJ Magic Mike. Give me just 1 second while I take care of that. There we go. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have an awesome rest of your week and get some good sleep. Enjoy the awesome vibes as we end our evening. Thank you all, and I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.